And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Monastery, the open bar of the internet, the world's greatest shit show, and the place where we, the good brothers and sisters of this most holy of temples, seek enlightenment through the drunkest, craziest, the most batshit ways possible. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me, I have a newcomer to the temple, creator of the universe in gaming, and now building up with Suzerain Legends, the head and aficionado of Savage Mojo, Miles M. Kantir, MMK. How you doing? How
I'm
you
doing
doing today?
great. Hi, boys and girls.
So how has the quarantine life been treating you of late?
We live in a strange world where um, there are all these things that we're not allowed to do, and I look across the water over at Seattle, um, where the first kind of major outbreak happened in the US, and uh, everybody's felt like they've been on lockdown for a very long time now, even though official lockdown's only been for a few weeks. And because there's no end in sight, you got so many people, like I guess me too, starting to get cabin fever and think, well, so how do we mix it up? How do we get something a little bit different out of our day? And it does feel like we don't live in the same universe that we used to just 3 months ago. If you are the publisher at a small games development company, then everything has changed. Uh, as a just trying to develop product and go and do the day-to-day things that used to be taken for granted. And with Suzerain, we definitely have a rhythm of the sort of things that we're doing with the community each day, each week, each month.
Mm-hmm.
All of that goes out the window. Suddenly, people behave completely differently, and the plans that we put in place 3 months ago for how 2020 would go and what sorts of things we'd get up to, just take them, just scrunch them up into a ball and toss them out the window. Uh, then you kind of can't go outside the window because you're in lockdown, so you can't pick up your own trash. But you just got to get rid of all of the ideas and come at it fresh. Talking to a whole bunch of small creative teams, and yeah, we're talking about hobby role playing here. Honestly,
Mm-hmm.
folks, if you didn't realize, every publisher outside of Wizards of the Coast is technically a small publisher in hobby gaming. And from small, you get to kind of the cottage industry micro scale, where most of the products that you see that you can either buy as print on demand, or you're lucky to get them in a game store or through download. Um, they're created by teams of one, two, three people, and you can imagine when you're on that scale, we're the sort of companies that look around at each other and go, "This is just a different universe. It's barren and scary. How on earth are we even just going to make it through this year with just constantly moving signs of, well, is it going to get better? Is it not going to get better?" People are scared to do anything with it, just even a single dollar, and yet, being small companies, we've got to pay the bills, and we've got these freelancers that we use to get our business together to get these amazing products created.
Mm-hmm.
They deserve to get paid and put food on their table, and they're scared at the time. It's a really strange world that we're in right now. And yeah, if I could give one little thing to folks out there, if you're listening to this in the middle of the coronavirus craziness and all that's going on, then show a little love to your favorite little independent creating studio. Everybody's got their own favorite product line from a small team. Just give them a little love, just a few dollars.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be great. Support their Patreon or something like that.
Yeah.
They really need it right now. If you're listening to this months down the line, and good on you, enjoy this for years to come. Please listen to it many times over. Maybe sort of as a historical footnote, you can look back and say, "Oh yeah, times were really tough." Because there's this idea that I'm seeing on the internet again and again over the years, that whenever the world economy slumps and whenever there's a dip in whether people feel optimistic or pessimistic,
Mm-hmm.
that gaming, hobby gaming in particular, role playing around the table will thrive, that the sales will go up because everybody realizes what great value for money it is. And I think that was something that was put forward many, many years ago. and has kind of just sort of stuck around the industry and keeps getting touted as one of those truths. And in practice, I have been a professional in this industry for over 20 years now,
Mm-hmm.
and in that time, I've seen a couple of pretty serious economic downturns and some big upswings. Talking to lots of my friends around the industry, from bigger companies, smaller companies, uh, there is some truth to your downswings won't be quite as bad as other people's downswings in something like the big expensive entertainment, going to concerts. Now, where you can pay $200 a ticket to go and see your favorite band at a stadium, uh, those tend to go first when people are feeling like they don't have much cash and they're worried about the future. Coronavirus has just turned it completely on its head. People are so scared.
I think if there's one thing, if there's one upside to these sorts of pandemics, is that um people's masks come off. Like
Yeah,
you get to see what people are actually like, what people actually stand for, it, and so on. Um, and I have noticed a few indie devs that I follow have been going to great lengths to share that to do virtual tabletop, which is definitely going to be a was already a business on the upswing, and I think that upswing is going to continue during and after this.
agreed.
Um,
Absolutely.
and you've got a you've got a bunch of people pitching in, especially in the greater community with Savage Worlds, but with several other games as well. Um,
Yeah. I love the fact that you get people who go out of their way to be helpful to other people. And you can see that comes out at times like this. People who put in effort with no benefit for themselves, but to try and help out others. And that's happening amongst players, amongst GMs. It's happening just as community leaders and online and physical spaces around the country. It's happening amongst publishers as well. And you can see those folks who are putting in the extra effort for gamerdom as a whole, even though it
mhm.
doesn't benefit them directly. And I love that. I think that's great.
Yeah,
The assumption that things aren't going to be too bad this time amongst publishers, because it's just an economic downturn, no matter what the cause. That's not being borne out at the moment. I know that there are a whole bunch of people who are suffering quite badly, but then there are people who are rising to the challenge to help out. And
hmm
doesn't that just feel good, knowing that that's actually the community we're a part of?
yeah. It's one it it's one of, like I said, when when push comes to shove, the people who have the strength of character to do so will always rise to the occasion. That's just how I see it. But onto saner things. It's a bit of a tradition in the temple to go into the humble beginnings, and I know this might be a bit of a stretch on things, given how long you've been in this, but talk to me about your first experience with tabletop, and what about it made it stick for you?
Okay, so let me tell you, the the price of me dedicating my life from there on forever to tabletop role playing and hobby gaming in general was 8 copper pieces. I was, guess, 7 or 8 years old, and my big brother came home. He was like just turned 12 at the time or something like that. And he came home with a friend of his, and he had this box in his hand. And I was like, "Oh, what's that?" He said, "It's a game." Like, "Oh, can I play?" And he was like, "Nah." Pushed me to one side. He and his friend disappeared into his bedroom, and they kind of unpacked it. And obviously, did about 30 minutes later, they came back out, and I was just kind of mooching, doing my own thing, and grabbed me by the collar, and he was like, "Okay, you're playing the game with us," because they just finally read the books that said that you need a DM and a couple of players for this Dungeons and Dragons thing. And so suddenly little brother was useful. And I got called in, and I was like, "Well, so what are we doing?" And inside the box, this is I guess 1978, around then. There was a default adventure, which was a trip of first level D&D characters going into a place where there were cutthroats and pirates in caves, and all of it kind of, none of us really knew what we were doing. We'd never really heard of this. I don't even know where my brother and his friend Stefan picked up this box from. D&D wasn't a big thing. It wasn't really being talked about. I honestly have no idea where they found it. And so we were muddling our way through trying to figure out what was going on. But it clicked with me at the point where, as we were sneaking through this dungeon, we got into a cave and were jumped by giant rats. Scariest thing in my life. Somebody talks about a rat the size of a dog, and I'm like, oh, no! And they're charging at us, and there's me as a level 1 wizard with my 1 spell a day, and we just made it through, killed the rats, and searched the room. And this is it, the seminal moment where we realized that you could search a room to look for loot. Yeah, we kind of just walked straight through. All the other encounters, we kind of survived them, made it through, got past the trap, killed off the brigands or whatever else. Hadn't even thought to loot the corpses or anything else. But we got to this room, and suddenly, for whatever reason, said, well, search the room. That's what's in here. And the answer was that there were 8 copper pieces. Tell you what, feeling rewarded by getting 8 copper pieces for taking down a bunch of giant rats, the swell of pride inside my body was so strong. I felt so good. I felt superhuman, and that was it. I was hooked. This is me. This is my life going forwards. And a couple of years later, my brother kind of looked at me and was like, "Here, you take this box," and he handed it to me, and he walked off because he'd just discovered girls. So he went off and got girls. I got Dungeons and Dragons all to myself and set up playgroups and carried on and have never looked back. You see, the difference was that years later, I discovered girls too, but I never really stopped the gaming on the side. That was always there in my life. And all the better if you can find gamer girls. So, yeah, I think I got the good deal out of that one. And that was it. That was the start. 8 copper pieces gave me a lifetime of role playing. And when I grew up, started getting my own career together, and started working with companies in the entertainment industry. It did not take me long to say I'm going to set up my own development studio, and I'm going to publish RPGs. I've been a journalist for Arcade magazine and a couple of the other magazines that were around at the time. But there's nothing like actually rolling up your sleeves and doing it for yourself. So that was about 97. So I've been doing this since the last millennium.
So one thing. Given the time frame that you mentioned, I would guess that, because you mentioned the box, so I'm gonna hazard a guess that it was probably Beckme era original D&D. I'm thinking either that or BX. It probably wasn't the blue box.
I wish I could tell you that I could remember a lot about the box. In fairness, what was in the box and how it was packaged, I don't remember a whole heck of a lot of that stuff. I remember the experience, and I kind of vaguely remember the map of that short adventure that they put in the sample adventure at the back, where you kind of went from a proper dungeon set of carved rooms through to this cave network with a river running through it. But that's really all I remember of the original box. I do remember it giving me so many hours of fun. One of the early things that grabbed me was immediately going and becoming a world creator. And I guess I could have looked back and said, that tells you what sort of person he's going to end up being. I always wanted to GM. I always wanted to be a person who created worlds. Doing these amazing maps was something that, as a kid, that was an arts and crafts project in and of itself. I would make beautiful maps of huge, expansive dungeons, and then after a few years, when things got sophisticated and people started doing overworld maps with things like the the Invincible Overlord said, where you had these huge hex terrain maps covering entire continents. I would love doing those as well. And I was always into creating worlds and creating them in depth, and enjoying watching different groups of players going through different parts of the world and overlapping here and there. And guess what? Here I am all these years later, and I'm still doing the same thing. I am creating a world in depth, in fact, a multiverse setting in depth, that for the last 20 years I've been watching gaming groups overlap with each other and tell the story of the universe and develop it. That's been my great joy for a long time. And with the new edition that we're doing now, Suzerain Legends, we're focusing harder than ever on game groups around the world come and change the universe with us. And this is no longer a publishing model where the publisher goes away and creates a book and says, "Here's your latest adventure pack. Here's the latest world book. You go ahead and play that material. We'll have more material for you in a couple of months." For Savage Mojo, the entire model has just been swung on its head, and we're into come and tell us about your games. It's a shared universe. As long as you're sticking to the basics of the world lore, tell us about your game. Tell us what your heroes have been getting up to, where, and how it's happening. And we're going to be picking the coolest things that are happening around the universe, and those will become part of the products going forwards. So gamers around the world are helping create the world. And I'll give a real practical example of that is that about 6 months ago, there used to be a shipyard in our realm of Untamed Empires, which is if you kind of cross the Three Musketeers with Pirates of the Caribbean, it's that kind of setting. And this shipyard, accidentally, as a result of the game session that was going on with that particular game group, through various heroic activities, the shipyard burnt to the ground. And it was such an awesome moment for that game group, and we loved the way in which it was told. It's now official. If any other game group goes to Bezier now, they'll see that there is an entire town that is burnt to the ground and being rebuilt slowly, and the Empire of the Dawn, whose shipyard that was, is struggling to make warships now. So that's affecting the sailing possibilities, and it's just very, very cool having that shared atmosphere to everything we do.
Yep. Now, so I think that's as good of a spot as any to, sorry, carbonation, to ask a bit about Suzerain. Now, what I'm curious about as kind of my lead in is what was the spark when it came to creating it back when it was known as a universe in gaming?
Okay, yeah. So now you got the jump on some folks here, in that you've had experience with Suzerain over many years. But Suzerain's been published for over 20 years now. So we do about 10 years per edition. So settle in. We're just doing a third edition here, and we'll be in for the next 9 years or so. Initially, the first edition, what we wanted to do was to create a game book that would allow people who had not necessarily ever gamed before to genuinely enjoy a nice, easy introduction to gaming, have a book that really explained it well, but beautiful, treat it like a coffee table art book. And that's something that has stuck with us all through the years, that the quality of the visuals, the quality of the print runs is absolutely paramount, first and foremost. And in there, we mixed a game system which allowed you to play live action and play around the table with the same characters. You just took your character sheet, you folded it into sixths, and stuck it in your pocket for live action play. And instead of rolling dice, you had a deck of cards for resolution, which was great because, again, those could be used live action really easily. You just pull a card from a deck, and that would give you responses. And I'm very proud of how that first edition went. It was a limited print run of 1,000 copies. If you can get hold of one, you should be very pleased to. They're rare as hen's teeth these days. But it's a beautiful slipcase book, and it's lovely. As an introductory game for players, it opens up just this great universe of possibilities. But for veteran players, there are benefits there, and those are the seeds of what we did in the second edition. The idea of the universe in gaming, which is that we saw a few things in traditional RPGs and the way they worked that didn't necessarily mesh really well with modern gaming and real life. There are few common problems that you hear about time and again. It will happen to us all about things like, well, what happens if one of your players rings 5 minutes before the session and goes, well, we can't be there. Sorry, real life in the way. And for some game groups, you're like, okay, but we left it in the middle of things. Your character's like right there, right in the middle of what we're doing. How do we get around that? Do we not game that? Yeah, everybody's going to come around anyway, but are we going to just do some board gaming this evening and wait and just delay another week? Or how do we deal with it? Do we NPC this person who's in the middle of this big diplomatic scene or in the middle of this big fight? Or how do we deal with it? And by the way the Suzerain universe works, there's an in-game reason why characters will disappear and reappear almost randomly. The thing with the Suzerain universe, for those who know nothing about Suzerain, is that you take the regular universe, it's what we live in, the day in, day out, and we just add one thing. We say magic is real, where you have the power of chi, the power of the force, whatever you want to call it. In the case of Suzerain, when scientists discovered this energy of the universe, the energy of the soul, they called it the pulse of all things. It's an ebb and flow, and so pulse is in everything, is in everybody. And the more heroic you get, the more of this pulse you've got. Extrapolating out from that, the easiest next stage is to say, well, that obviously means there's a spirit world where you can sort of see the souls of people and see how powerful they are. The heroes grow brightest and whatever. And we took that to the next level and said, well, what happens when a hero, when they become super, super powerful, become the ultimate? They go to become demigods, and then eventually they become gods themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so there must be god realms. There must be places for the gods. Wait a minute. Does that mean that places like Yggdrasil, the World Tree, and Mount Olympus exist? Well, I guess it does. What about more strange and weird corners of the universe? Do we have these realms, as we call them, for other concepts? And we just played with this and kept developing it until it became real and meshed. And we've set entire games in. We've had campaigns set out in the realm of the Egyptian gods, hunting down Set, who's not a good god. I've got to tell you, that's a naughty god. And I think that what this gave people was a reason, and on purpose we designed it that way, that if a player can't make it, then their character has been recalled to the realms of the gods, the maelstrom as we call it, has been recalled there to give a briefing to various gods and say, how are things going? And the gods, when they're looking on the mortal realms, they tend not to be particularly great about their timing. They're just like, it's about time for an update. We don't care what he's in the middle of. Boom, grab said character, pull them through the veil and into the maelstrom. And the character just disappears in the middle of the room. Now, how does everybody role play around the fact that somebody just disappeared in the middle of their negotiation with the king or in the middle of a battle? How do they deal with that? Then when they reappear suddenly, do you risk suddenly being burned as witches, or what happens? That's the fun of the role play there, but we've given a reason for why that would happen. And there are a whole, I guess with Suzerain, we geared it up to say, we understand the real world has problems like this. How are we going to deal with them? How are we going to deal with things like permanent character death and the introduction of a new character, which is always a thorny issue for role-playing games, especially if you've got a longer campaign that's been running for a while. And again, we have meta reasons for making that transition a little bit easier, adding a new player to the group. These are all things that are inside the Suzerain universe lore that make it into the game. And so when we talk about a universe in gaming and that second edition evolution of Suzerain, that was our big thing. We were really focusing on the elements that made life a little bit easier from a roleplay perspective to just keep telling the great story.
All right. So with that system, you originally had done a homegrown one, which I always thought had a interesting amount of potential, and I will freely admit that I'm a bit of a sucker for for card based mechanics. Um, but then sometime later, you moved it over to the Savage World system. So, what I'm curious about is what do you think that from developing that original system, what was the learning experiences that you had with it, and what prompted the move to, of all systems, Savage Worlds?
Yeah, it's fair questions. I would say that each different version that we've published of the Suzerain universe we've been very, very clear that we don't just take the same thing, slap new stats on it. That never works, really, does it? No.
Not unless you're doing sports games, and you're not doing sports games.
We're not doing sports games. So really, the key here was to go from the ground up and say there's a different play experience for different gaming groups. It's not just because the rule systems are different and lend themselves well to different types of gaming, but also because the audience for Savage Worlds or the audience for indie rule systems, they have different expectations of what type of a game and how it'll flow, what kind of stories will be told, and you want to make sure that you make people happy. The Suzerain universe is a big enough and flexible enough place that we've been able to do that. So, for instance, you mentioned that we had our own rule system. We did, and we learnt over a period of 2, 3, 4 years that as much as we enjoyed doing it, and we had a very, very dedicated and loyal community, that we were hitting a ceiling. We're hitting that what's called that kind of the indie ceiling of we can't really break it out to be a major thing because it was designed from the ground up for the Suzerain universe and the way the universe was. We couldn't license it out particularly to the traditional setting X or Y. It was just going to be our thing. So we weren't looking to make that system into the new Fate or the new whatever generic system could work in this and that. We had a Suzerain rules system, and we had gone about as far as we could with that. What was holding people back as we asked them more and more was, yeah, we don't really want to be involved in learning another indie rule system. That was fine when you just had one book. We might buy something for its own sake. Yeah, there's so many really good indie games over the years that have come out where that one book, that's it. It's everything you need. It tells its story, and you move on to something different. Adventures of Baron Munchausen and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
If you're lucky, you might get 2 or 3 supplements in with that, and that's your run. People then expect to move on. With us, we knew we had bigger things we wanted to tell, and we wanted to be able to fill the Suzerain universe with all sorts of content and share that with the world. And honestly, the money just wouldn't have been there. And it is down to the end of the day, you've got to be able to put food on the table and pay the bills. You've got to make sure that your artists all get to be able to do the same. And with hand on heart, we said, all right, we love our bespoke rule system. It is well loved by the people who love that indie vibe and are really enjoying that. We've got to find another way to tell the stories we want to tell. And the answer for us was we already had a good relationship with Shane and Pinnacle, and it seemed natural that as Pinnacle went from the bespoke system Deadlands through to Great Rail Wars through to this first edition of Savage Worlds, we wanted to be in on that. So this was back in the days where Shane kept the licensee group of people who were allowed to create Savage Worlds products very, very tight, very small. And we were lucky enough to be invited into that and have been there ever since. Where Savage Worlds excels is because it comes from the Great Rail Wars, it lends itself to, which itself is a tabletop game, it lends itself to cinematic combat beautifully.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the flexibility without complexity was something that we were really looking for, genuinely led to that. And with each generation of Savage Worlds that's come since, we've been pleased to see that Savage Worlds has rounded out that core of what Savage Worlds is, the fast, furious fun, meaning usually in combat fast, furious fun, got expanded outwards and fleshed out just that little bit to give us a rounded roleplay experience that encompasses a whole load of other types of scenes. So for Suzerain, I always talk about the fact that you've got combat, but combat's just one part of the story. You've also got, you've got your social, diplomatic scenes. Like I say, you've got that meeting with the king where you're trying to convince him to raise an army to defend the kingdom. Those diplomatic scenes should be key beats to the story as well. You've got physical scenes that aren't combat, the chase across the rooftops or in a vehicle, just that chase across the countryside, across the city. Those kind of things are really important. You watch a James Bond movie, and sure, shots are fired, but a lot of the action is actually people chasing each other, people sneaking past each other. There's a lot of physicality going on that isn't combat based. And again, Savage Worlds just it's as it's fleshed out and rounded around the edges, beautifully allows us to do a lot more of that, which is all very Suzerain as well. And you've got those mental challenges, the investigations, being able to go into the world and saying, we've got to solve this mystery that's out there. We're not all the Scooby-Doo gang, but we've got an element of that in what we're telling here as a story, and that's a nice change of pace from another fist fight. So with Savage Worlds evolving over the generations, there's been absolutely no problem with us sticking with Savage Worlds and being a part of that ecosystem of that community. There are a lot of savages in the world, a lot of very happy people. We love giving them a different type of gaming where they can travel from one setting to another without having to just put down their campaign and start again with new characters. They're welcome to if they want to, but the traditional old school way of doing a Savage Worlds book was that you would create a plot point campaign with a bunch of savage tales for the GM. There would be player background with a bunch of new edges, hindrances, powers, maybe a couple of new skills, and it would generally be you'd start with a novice character. At about heroic rank, the story would end. There'd be a few savage tales left you could carry on telling, and if a GM wanted to, they could carry on through into legendary, and of course, legendary goes on forever. And most game groups, empirically, just quit at that point and go, well, we'll now buy this other book over here, start a new bunch of characters, and instead of playing as supervillains taking over the world and protecting it when the superheroes have all been defeated, suddenly we're going to be playing in our version of Jack the Ripper, London. And it's choppy. For a lot of game groups, it's, we created those characters, we love them. Got to put them aside, though. We want to play in a new setting. All right, this new book's come out. Put them aside, start new novice characters. But we love the power level once you get to veteran, once you start getting to heroic. We love the power level there. All right, so Suzerain says, look, it's a metaverse. There are lots of settings around here, and there are portals between these different settings. There are beings of godlike power who can move you around to make you get from one part of the universe to another. If you've been developing a character in their story arc from novice through to heroic, and at some point you're all super excited because, let's say, for instance, a brand new stompy robot sci-fi movie comes out, everybody's really into it, and you're itching to play that game, but you don't want to drop your characters, you don't want to drop the story. The GM can just flip it on a dime, and the heroes can find their way into that setting. Same heroes, same experiences. They may have come from a fantasy background, but they find themselves in a sci-fi future. And Suzerain saying, your characters are heroes of the universe, that's what we deliver. We deliver that experience, and we deliver a late game that is extremely compelling for folks. Rather than legendary just going on forever, we added a whole new rank right at the beginning. First thing we chose to do in Savage Worlds was we added a new rank, demigod, and said there's actually legendary leads into this new rank, demigod. Demigod is where you've got genuinely the powers of a young god, genuinely got the powers of those really headline superheroes, your Hulks or Supermans of this world. Now you're looking at the trip from demigod up to at what point do you finish up the challenges that you feel are still worth playing, and then evolve your group into becoming a pantheon in their own right, which, all things being equal, maybe your next game group will have that pantheon of gods as NPCs to meet up with and do missions for. So the cycle will continue and start again. And it's fun. I mean, we hear it again and again from game groups. They can't wait to get towards that content. They're really looking forward to it, and yeah, it's not something that any other Savage licensee is doing. So why not?
So you've been inundated with Savage Worlds in one form or another for many years, and one thing that I'm curious about is through the original take with Suzerain to things like Continuum and now Legends. What have been some of the learning experiences that you've had within Savage Worlds?
Well, so I guess some of the real where we had to sit down and scratch our heads and go, okay, this isn't what we were expecting. We got to get through it. They've actually come from where we did branch out into other areas. So, for instance, we had a trilogy of old school killer dungeons. Just a real. It was our homage to the original S series of modules in D&D. We had the Dungeon Lands, the Tomb of the Lich Queen, Machine of the Lich Queen, and Palace of the Lich Queen. Really great little realm there where you could do old school dungeoning, which is something that there's not an awful lot of in Savage Worlds. And through doing that, we got approached by some pretty senior designers on Pathfinder saying to us, well, this could be a really good Pathfinder thing. And Pathfinder, of course, has got a huge audience. This is at the height of the first edition of Pathfinder. How do you feel about doing a Pathfinder edition of your Dungeonlands trilogy? And we kind of huddled together as a group and went, all right, hold on a second here. How do we feel about this? And there were voices that said, I don't know, Pathfinder, it's a lot of work. It's pretty crunchy. It's going to take a lot to do the rules. We would need to get a set of rules experts from Pathfinder to do this, because obviously we're all Savage Worlds experts. And I don't know, is it worth the hassle? Sure, there's an audience for it, so we're sure that we won't lose money on this, and they'll be looking for something like this. But is it right to do it? Does it feel right for the Suzerain universe? And we chose to, because we had such a great group of Pathfinder developers come to us, rules team developers come to us to saying they wanted to do it, and we converted the core book for Suzerain to Pathfinder and the Dungeonlands trilogy. And the way we did it was we set that team to tear it apart and put it back together again in a way that would please Pathfinder fans and would give them their experience. And at every stage, we would be talking with them, going, all right, if you're doing this, is it still Suzerain? What else can Suzerain offer? And does that then feel Pathfinder? And only where we have that intersect of those two things, it's both Suzerain and Pathfinder, that's it, laser focused. And we actually spent over a year developing just that edition. And we learned a load of things about Suzerain universe, about what is Suzerain, what isn't. I remember developing a document which was called the DNA of Suzerain, breaking down across all the different generations of Suzerain product, what's really Suzerain, because we've changed it. In the first edition, you played a different type of character than you did when we had the universe in gaming. When you moved to Savage Worlds, we again slightly changed the type of character that you play and the experience that those heroes would get, going up to demigods and becoming gods. What's truly the important thing about Suzerain? Going into a Pathfinder edition, that was an eye opener. We really had to think about it and go, okay, we're no longer linking the system and the universe. We're talking about what is the universe and making sure that it gets its own take in the system. And that did really well, actually. It turns out that we must have hit that pretty well on, because that Pathfinder edition of the Dungeonlands in the core book did wonderfully. And inevitably, although we used a bunch of the same maps and illustrations and a few of the same encounters, we completely rewrote from scratch to fit the pacing and the style of Pathfinder encounters. So, was it worth it? Yes. Did we learn a lot about Suzerain and what is Suzerain? Absolutely. It allowed us a couple of years later, when we were approached by one of the Suzerain family members, one of our most trusted friends, to help him out on a Kickstarter that he had been right royally left in the lurch with, and he was in a bad way over this. He said, I need some help here. I need to develop a book, and I need to develop it fast, because the original publishers bailed on this project. And I'm the named writer on this, and suddenly I'm the person who everybody's coming to saying, hey, it's you stole our money. And of course it wasn't. He also didn't get paid as a writer. And so with zero budget and really having to sort of jackknife out other plans for that year, we took on board this book, and it was a 13th Age book. Again, we'd never done 13th Age product, and suddenly we were putting together a team of 13th Age experts by talking to the people who published 13th Age and a load of the community members who came together. Some amazing rules guys, and they asked the same question. They were like, well, how does the story we've got planned here, how does that fit with Suzerain? How does that fit inside? What is the DNA of Suzerain? And we learned a lot by creating a 13th Age version just for that one book, just to give those Kickstarter backers their product. And that was it was definitely worth it. We had a lot of fun with that, even though I don't know whether we will carry on doing product in other game systems or not over the years. Our first love and first focus is on Savage Worlds. I don't see any reason why to change that with Suede coming along and looking strong. I think it's good. We're pretty happy that we now know what Suzerain is. It is at its heart a multiverse version of a superhero setting where your characters can come from wherever they want. And we know that that's what it is at heart. We want your heroes to feel powerful right from the get-go, right from novice rank, all the way through to when they become gods. they should feel like they have something special. They've got a superpower. They've got something they can do. Doesn't matter. Did they come from a fantasy world? Did they come from a Three Musketeers swashbuckly world with a bit of magic thrown in? Post-apocalyptic? Doesn't matter. Hardcore sci-fi. Historical? Did they come from ancient Greece or ancient Rome? All of those doesn't make a difference where your character comes from. That's the veneer over the top. That's the sense of who they are. But what they can do is always going to feel like they are the heroes that will save the universe. And that's what we've learned for Suzerain Legends by doing all of this other stuff.
So now with Legends, has there been the question of where does this fit in when it comes to the previous iterations of Suzerain?
Always. We don't want ever to have material that isn't appropriate from one generation to another. We've never scrapped the Suzerain universe, not in over 20 years of developing it, and said what happened before didn't happen or isn't appropriate for what you're doing now. The first edition was a standalone, just a single book, beautiful hardcover box set book, lovely, but everything that happens in that and everything we talk about in the universe is there in the second edition, is there with the continuing edition with in Savage Worlds, and on the side of that, our universe in gaming, our own rule system. All of that's there. We just build on it and we say, well, you're going to play a slightly different type of character this time, but everything that you knew before was there. And now we're moving to Suzerain Legends. It was more important than ever to say, if you have access to any of our material from the Continuum Edition and you don't mind talking to us a little bit about how to convert some of the stat blocks for Suede rather than for Deluxe, then play those adventures. They are still relevant, they're still valid, they're still a core part of the Suzerain experience. Go ahead and play them. But as far as the timeline of the Suzerain universe is concerned, we have a plot going on in the background that like I say, we're working with just any game group around the world. If you want to, you can come and submit your session reports and tell us what you and your heroes are getting up to, and you can be a part of this. But there's a big story that's moving forwards. There are universal threats that are affecting all the realms, so it doesn't matter where you live, where you're adventuring, they will affect you at some point. And the events that happened in some of the books over the last 10 years in the Continuum edition, in the second edition of Suzerain, those are assumed to have happened, and we have a conclusion. And where we love to leave the result of a book open, not assuming what the result will be. And I'll give you an example. We've got a book called Clockwork Dreams that's set in a steampunk realm of the Fey folk, elves, boggarts, brownies, pixies, sprites, those kind of beings, not a human to be seen. And in the story, in the plot point, it leads up to having to figure out who is going to rule the land, who's going to be the king. And ultimately, you get to make that choice, hopefully, as heroes, unless you've done things horribly wrong throughout. And at no point does the book tell you this concludes with such and such becoming the king. No, the person who becomes king, you choose. But now we're into a third edition. We have kind of had to say to the world, in the official timeline, in what we call the prime reality, that those events have happened, and there is a particular character, Grismund the Troll, who is now the king of Mercadia, this realm of Fey steampunk. And so we can build stories based on the fact that there is now a new king in that realm. And so play in your own version in alternate realities. Play in your own version at home. Go ahead, enjoy those. They're so. I'm so proud of every development team, everything we've ever created over the last 10 years. We've created something like 16, 17 big books and a whole load of side material, a whole load of plot points that are right there. Every single book of ours was a plot point with Savage Tales, with player information. And I couldn't be prouder of all the teams that did the work on those things. They are still a whole bunch of fun for anybody. They're still available. There's still a whole bunch of fun. Get them on Drive-Thru RPG. But just understand that the events that happened there, they're now your alternate reality take on what happened, because we know that in the prime reality, Suzerain universe has moved on, and in the prime reality, a king has been put on the throne of Mercadia, for instance, or we know what the outcome was with hunting Set down, the god of the Egyptian pantheon in Set Rising. That's I think that's great. I don't want to tell people that the books they've got are useless. The campaigns they played don't have any value. And what's nice about Shane is that he understood that the Savage community doesn't want to throw away all their old material. So the jump from deluxe to Suede has been evolution rather than revolution. You can
All right.
easily play previous product in with a Suede rule set. You have to make a few changes here and there, but it's not actually that difficult.
All right, which is that's definitely something that I've been curious about um since Adventure Edition had come out. I wanted to know how Adventure Edition had affected people, because for some people they were taken by surprise. Others had seen it coming. I'm guessing in your case, you had already known to some degree that it was in the works.
Right, Project Black, as it was called for sort of the year before it was announced to the world. We knew that it was coming, though Shane was very good about saying we're keeping it very heavily under wraps. The licensees will get to see a copy when we're ready to share it with the public, as a beta. Um, and I think that was fair. But we knew that it was coming, and so we knew some changes were going to happen. Uh, from a story point of view, writing encounters and scenes for plot point campaigns and Savage Tales, there are changes, but they're not as significant as players see. So GMs won't actually see as big a change as players see when they're creating their characters, because I think most of the changes that have happened between Deluxe and Suede are at the player end, at the player character end. Changes to the way edges work, particularly arcane backgrounds have had an overhaul. Races have had a few tweaks and so on. And when it comes to choosing how you play your character, uh, little changes to how something works with grappling rules or shaken checks or whatever else, they can make a big difference as to how you choose to build your character.
Mm-hmm.
And so for players, it can feel like Suede was a big shift, but actually from a GM's perspective, behind the scenes, when you read an encounter that was written for Deluxe, it's not that difficult to look at that and go, oh yeah, in 5 minutes I could have this ready for me to play with my Suede group. So that's great news, and I'm pretty sure that was an active choice by the Pinnacle crew to make it easy on GMs to carry on using material that's been around for a long time, so gamers don't feel like their entire library could just ditch it in the trash, folks. It's useless to you now. It's
Oh,
great that didn't.
oh, definitely. Now, one of the things that I thought was definitely unique um about how Legends is being presented is through the jump starts and primers. Now, primers are nothing new for Savage Worlds in general and for Suzerain in particular, but I'm curious as to the reasoning why you went with this sort of format to kind of get people up to speed about how Legends is going to be working.
I think that first and foremost, understand the kind of person I am as the creator of the Suzerain universe and the person who's been integral to pretty much everything that's happened with it over the last 20 years. As a person, I like to see gamers gaming and enjoying Suzerain. So my
Mm-hmm.
priority, from whether it was from early alpha days of developing the first edition through to right now here in 2020, I've wanted to put Suzerain into lots of people's hands and just let them have fun with it. And you can look at our publisher page on DriveThruRPG, and you'll see that there's an entire category called free treasure, and there are dozens and dozens of products there for you to have for free. Just have them. And as we convert things for Fantasy Grounds, and we give Fantasy Grounds players the chance to play Suzerain, again, all the same things. I'm saying, just make that free. Make that free. Everything we and so far we've been developing the core of Suzerain Legends Edition, coming into a Kickstarter that will allow us to get a physical print run of that. And everything we've developed is free. Not a single product is paid for. So the core book, as you say, people who've done primers before, that's pretty popular and pretty common. With Suzerain, the entire core book is free. So it's a take it. If you want to leave us a tip, it's pay what you want, go ahead. But if you want to put $0 down, 0 cents, take the book and play with it. It means more to me to know that there's a game group enjoying it. And even if you don't play it, it means a lot to me that you enjoy reading the book, because a lot of gamers, let's be fair about it, we collect books which we know we're never going to get around to playing. So they might as well be a good read. They might as well be beautiful. That's important to us. And so we have the jump starts, 7 jump starts, in fact. Most settings have got one, a little bit of world background, an adventure, a set of pre-gen characters, maybe if you're lucky, or at least some character options for when you're creating characters to make them feel like they come from that setting. In our case, we created a full set of 6 pre-gen characters. There are about a dozen new character options, plus setting background, and there's a full adventure in each of these jump starts. And we're covering 7 different realms of Suzerain. It took us 7 months to do, where it would have taken other publishers a month or less to do theirs, because we cared about getting across the variety of what Suzerain is. It's a multiverse setting. We have a place we can cross over between a post-apocalyptic 23rd century and the realm of high fantasy, which is kind of one of these realms floating out in the maelstrom, made of all of our human ideas of what high fantasy is. And if you create characters and play a story in one of those realms, you'll get a different experience than if you play in a cyberpunk version, or in a post-apocalyptic version, or our Three Musketeers setting, or in a Celtic Fae setting, like I mentioned, our steampunk fairies. And we just needed to get that across. We said, have an adventure for each of them. We're going to do them at exactly the same quality as our paid product will be. We're going to not skimp, no corners cut. Have them, have fun with them. You can probably, it's either one long game session or a mini campaign of 2 to 3 sessions for each of these. In 5 minutes, you can be sitting at the gaming table and playing, because we make it really easy to read, really easy to understand. Plus, you've got the pre-gens ready to rock and roll. And if you get to the end of one, there's a little tease, a little hook at the end of each of these adventures that lends you in to go through a portal, which is a very Suzerain thing, to another realm and hop into a different adventure. And you can choose which one follows next. You can actually do a cycle of all 7 of them as 7 mini campaigns. You can probably get like 20 sessions worth of gaming on this free material. And when you come out of the last portal after the 7th adventure, you reappear back through the portal at the moment where the first group jumped through, and you've come literally full circle. And the 2 different groups of characters kind of look at each other across this middle of this. Inevitably, there's in the middle of a huge battle. In the middle of a huge battle, and they're like, "Who are you? Who are you?" And suddenly there's like, "Oh, okay." And then you can choose, as a GM and as a group of players, you can choose: are we enjoying this? If we're enjoying it, which set of characters from which realm do we want to continue their story? All right, this lot, let's go back to them. Let's make them our campaign. We're giving how many hours of entertainment can you get out of that? Many. Let's say it's each one of those jump starts gives you 2 4-hour sessions. That's 56 hours of gaming right there, just off those jump starts. And I'm pleased to give that stuff to the players and to their GMs. Enjoy playing it. And again, we put it on Fantasy Grounds for people to play virtually, particularly useful in right now with the world in lockdown. But the core book, the entire core book, is free, and it's important for us to be able to say to folks, if you've enjoyed those jump starts, here you go. Here's the whole thing. Here's all our information on the world background, the lore of how did the Earth get so messed up by the 23rd century? How on earth did we open a bridge into a realm of high fantasy? What's going on with heroes being under siege and being attacked by this cosmic terror that's the big plot line, this cosmic terror called the Tempest? What's going on with all of that? And we've written all of our books in such a way and illustrated them in such a way, because there's a very new art style to the new edition, that they look like and read like they are mission briefings from senior members of this heroic resistance program called the Awakened, trying to fight back against the Tempest. And they're giving you mission briefings of things that are going on in hotspots around the universe in these different realms. And it's just a cool read. It's fun. It isn't old school textbook. What I remember most vividly about the early years of role playing is that the books that you bought were just big, thick, hardback books written with lots of charts and tables. They read like they were a science textbook from high school. And
especially some of those that were I could see that with some of those that were very much entrenched in the wargaming attitude.
Right, absolutely. And I still think that there are quite a lot of people who write their books in a way that their English school teacher at high school would approve of. Never use a contraction. Don't ever start a sentence with and or but. And and I threw that out 20 years ago and said to folks, if you're going to be a writer for Savage Mojo, take the stick out and just write it how you would say it. Imagine you're sitting on your couch. This is it. This is the whole brief to our writers. Imagine you're sitting on the couch next to your best friend, and he says, "Hey, so tell me about this thing." Now, how would you say it to your best friend on the couch? That's how you should write it. Contractions and all,
Mm-hmm.
bad grammar and all. Write it with personality. And I think it makes for a much more readable, much more fun experience having that. With Suzerain Legends, we even took it one stage further, where we have three different people, technically four, but we haven't started using the fourth writer yet. We got three different people giving these briefings, and they each have a very different personality. So there isn't just the one casual style for everything we write, but you know if Umbra the elf is writing this section and giving you your briefing about something, she's got
Mm-hmm.
her own take on it. She's got her own attitude. She's got her own opinions on what's going on in the Suzerain universe. And if it's Padre giving the briefings, he's a pretty hardcore combatant. He's seen some hard times, and he's got a different approach. So these narrators have their own style.
Yes.
When they write notes in the margins to all of our illustrations, like all our illustrations are done in a style of as if they were sketched in the margins of these mission briefings, and they have these little notes attached to them, giving a little bit of description about what's going on in the illustration. That you'll notice that the handwriting is different for each of those. We keep that theme going, and I'm very proud of that because I think that you'll have fun just enjoying the setting, enjoying reading the mission briefings, enjoying reading the adventure. Uh, it oozes attitudes at different places. The characters don't always get along. Those narrators. So Liam, our catfolk from Shintar, our extreme sports personality,
Mm-hmm.
he's likely to think that Umbra is way too formal. That she's just no fun whatsoever. That she's just really intensely focused on beating the Tempest, and there's nothing else to life. That's all that matters. Um, and so he's constantly looking to lighten the mood a little bit and to say, look, it's not all doom and gloom. We've got hope. There's always a chance here, and just chill out a little bit. The universe is a beautiful and amazing place. Let me show you some of it. You go and find it out for yourself. And hey, if you find it's corrupted, beat that corruption in the ass. Just kick it, and return the universe back to being the awesome place that we want it to be.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I'm loving it. It's a fresh take on the development process, as I say, particularly since we're also taking in information from game groups around the world at all times, and using them to help us shape what the future is going to be. You ask me, where's the Suzerain universe going to be in 2 years' time? I couldn't tell you where the story will move to. Entire realms could have been just destroyed and eaten by the Tempest corruption. Entire realms could have been saved by the action of a few heroes. I don't know, and that's part of the fun for me as a creative, is that the Suzerain universe is alive. It genuinely feels like it's not. I'm a guiding hand. I'm not necessarily the be all and end all of this is what's going to happen. It's cool. It's neat. It's a lot of fun for me, and it's a lot of fun for the community.
Mm-hmm. Now, taking that into account, for the people who might just be getting into this through Legends, because I'm always going to put a spin on something that Stan Lee once said, and say that every RPG is someone's first.
Right. Absolutely. I agree with that.
So could you go into kind of a skinny of some of the worlds that have already been written about when it comes to Suzerain Legends?
Legends is focusing much more on one area of the universe that's under siege, that's at war with this elemental evil force, the Tempest, and where the continuing edition before we released books that told a self-contained story within the Suzerain universe, but they were hitting different places. We had Dogs of Hades that was just set in the far future of the mortal realms and was
Mhm.
Spartans in space, effectively. We had, like I say, Set Rising, where you went into the Maelstrom, in amongst the god realms, went to the Egyptian god realm and got involved in a bounty hunt to take down a god. Each of them were completed and finished, and when you finished it, you could portal out to somewhere else with those characters and start the next adventure for them. But they didn't all link in together. Suzerain Legends is very different to that. In Suzerain Legends, we're saying all of that stuff exists. Go ahead and run whatever adventures you want in those realms. Um, any realm of your imagination can be there. Any period of history, people can go through a portal and turn up in it. Run whatever adventures you want there. Have fun with the framework that is Suzerain. But we will be focusing on 7 lands that are linked together. And for that, we have the post-apocalyptic 23rd century. And because of an event that happened, one of the areas of Earth in the 23rd century has been kicked sideways so that it straddles both the mortal realms and the realm of high fantasy. And then you've got some fantasy lands on the side of that. And 7 jumpstarts, no surprise that we've got those because there are 7 lands to talk about. We have Gatherall, cyberpunk city that's in a bubble in the middle of the post-apocalyptic wasteland. We have this one cyberpunk city that's been developing over the last 100 years since the Pulse War was over. Outside of the bubble, you've got the Wilderlands, classic post-apocalyptic. You want to take a Mad Max take on it, you can. Any post-apocalyptic you can think of. I personally loved when I was growing up the Gamma World setting, and to me, whenever I think post-apocalyptic, I always end up drifting a little bit towards a Gamma World type of feel, the radiation, the mutations, that side of
The
things.
complete insanity.
The complete insanity type of post-apocalyptic. You follow it around the world a little bit, and there's an area of the world that has kind of pulled out of the worst of the post-apocalyptic and is starting to build empires, but they haven't rebuilt the technology to the right levels yet. So they're at the age of sail. So this is where we get our swashbuckling and Pirates of the Caribbean type of setting, where there's a bit of the old world technology, the sci-fi tech thrown in there from before this Pulse War. And then you get to Australia, which is the bridge land. It's the fantasy realm that sits with 1 foot in the physical world, in our world, and 1 foot over in the realm of high fantasy that is constantly at war. That's the one that's invaded by the Tempest most. And once you're in the realm of high fantasy, then you can go through Australia and into places like Shintar, which is it's a continent that is absolutely the epitome of epic high fantasy. It's heroes being superheroic. Evil is absolute evil. And what are you going to do about it? Or you've got Dungeon Lands, which I've already talked about, which is this pocket realm that floats out there that is an ever-changing puzzle box of multiple levels of very, very high-level bad guys and guarding some very, very intense magical treasure. And it is a classic killer dungeon. And finally, we're focusing on the Fey Lands, which is, as I mentioned, it's the Celtic myths with the wee folk, the brownies and the boggarts, the elves and the she. Those are a lot of fun. That's a realm that I'm very proud of because I feel like we have a place that suits a particular game style there. It's an ever-changing land. It is made of pure magic. There are no humans there. There's nothing particularly normal and humanly about it. Just like old Celtic myths and legends, everything is crazy. People who you meet will change personality or will just be just play a joke on you because they feel like it, even though they're your best friends. They'll still tie your shoelaces together because it's funny. And this lends itself really well to 2 groups of players. It lends itself brilliantly to kids playing because inevitably, I don't know if you've played with young kids, but they have a tendency to want to jump in and kind of part GM themselves. They don't the boundaries that we all set as adults in gaming, that the GM sets the scene and we just play our character. They don't really have that, and kids tend to jump in there and go, oh yeah, and there's a door in this other wall which we can walk through. And as a GM, you can either stand there and go, well, no, actually there isn't. That's for the GM to say. You just play your character there. Or you can turn around and go, it's the Fey Realm. Guess what? There's a door in that wall. Suddenly appeared. And just have fun with that. And so it suits kids play really, really well. If your family's playing or kids at your local game store, that's perfect. The other group who will really enjoy it, I think, are people for whom the chaotic, the anarchic, the flippant fun is their big thing. If you want to do Deadpool style gaming, you'll probably want to do it in the Feylands. Deadpool might actually be a troll instead of a human being, but hey, that's not the point. If you want to break the fourth wall and really just let loose, the Feylands is the place to do it, almost certainly.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the seven. Those are the 7 lands we focused on. There's a jumpstart for each of those. You can try and just get a feel for a little bit of what those settings are like, and of course they link together. Characters are constantly moving from one thing to another, and there's an overarching plot of the corruption from this elemental evil force, the Tempest. So people who know nothing, just start small, pick up a jumpstart, enjoy it, and then go, all right, where do we go next? Well, I kind of like the idea of this one. A little bit of cyberpunk never hurt. And so you pick up that one and then try that out. When you pick up the core book, again, you're not paying for it, so just pick up the core book and have a read through. You can flick through and have a sense of what the Suzerain universe is just in casual reading, and the changes that we make to the vanilla Savage Worlds Adventurers Edition rule set are relatively minor. We do make changes, as I think almost every licensee does with their own worlds, but one thing we have learned. You asked, what have we learned between editions?
Mm-hmm.
One thing we learned from the previous edition to this one is if the change isn't really, really impactful from world lore perspective and doesn't make a big difference to the gaming that you do, then don't make the change. Leave it vanilla. So we've actually pared back the amount of things that we've changed a whole bunch. And yes, there are changes, but I think that it takes the description of what's different in Suzerain versus Vanilla Suede. There are only 4 pages of stuff there. We add a bunch of new options for people to play with, particularly since we add a new rank, Demigod. So for Demigods, there are some extraordinary powers to play with. But in general, I think that start small and just build your way up there. Grab a jump start, enjoy whatever you feel like enjoying, and then explore some more.
Yep. Now, there's a few people, and given the myriad of worlds, this was actually a question that was asked to me as I was doing prep by one of my IRL students, because he much like myself is a long time watcher of almost every Kurosawa film that there is.
Mm-hmm.
So say that he approached me and he asked me, okay, I want to. I know we're running Suzerain, but I want one of the worlds we go into to be a fantasy samurai kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And especially since he and I are both fans of L5R, that definitely helps matters. What of these settings would be the best fit for it, or would it be one of those where I could just use default Suzerain and be relatively good?
Oh, I think you can create your own bit of either choosing to say we want to set ours in amongst all the stuff that Suzerain's officially publishing, so have it in the 23rd century, but we haven't featured what happens in Japan in the post-apocalyptic. So return to the old samurai ways could be a fun twist there. If you don't want that post-apocalyptic though, why not simply set your setting in the 1500s in Japan and accept that the Suzerain universe, since we've added the idea of everybody, every object has the force, has this pulse inside it, has the power to do something supernatural and or magical, then you could have Oni wandering around medieval Japan just using the core Suzerain set of rules. You don't need any more than that to do it. There is, for those who want a slightly different take on it, we have talked a little bit about a place called the Realm of Ascendant Order, where the spirits of great heroes like Tokugawa Ieyasu they run their own effective god realm based around the idea of things being ordered and being structured, and that's how they ward off the great evils of the universe. And it's a realm that's entirely crystalline in all of its creations. So you have these wonderful like Edo Castle and Kyoto, but everything is made of these crystal structures, and it's just kind of a neat fantasy take on the samurai aesthetic. There, you can choose to do any of those things, and you don't need anything more than just a cool Suzerain book. Yeah. And if somebody turns to me within the community and said, "I've got this idea, I really want to do medieval Japanese samurai type of feel to it, but here's where my group wants to take it. Here's the kind of ideas that I've got. What would I do within Suzerain?" I'll do exactly the same as I did with many game groups already since we've started Suzerain Legends, which is I will happily talk through with you and help put together ideas, potentially even new edges and hindrances, new powers, new races, even if you want to have things like a kitsune shapeshifter. Those kind of things I'm happy to work with. I work with the community all the time on things like that. So helping groups come up with their cool take, and as long as it fits within the Suzerain universe, then please, just all I ask is tell us how your heroes are doing. Tell us how the story's progressing. We love to hear about it, and who knows, you may find that your legends become inspiring to other people in the Suzerain universe down the line.
Yeah, which is definitely the vibe that I get with what you're speaking of throughout this is that of something that kind of is a living campaign, but at the same time not as restrictive or as inside as a living campaign. Kind of that as much as I hate to use the term continuity, that I saw through Legends of the Five Rings, or what Warhammer Fantasy Battle tried to do with the Storm of Chaos event and backfired hard.
Right. I had somebody 6 months ago rap me on the knuckles pretty hard. This is an industry figure. And say, "Hey, MMK, you know what? You do not have a living campaign. Stop calling it that." And I'm like, really? Because that's what I think we call Legends Awaken. That's what our Legends Awaken initiative is. And he was like, no, it's not. To most gamers, a living campaign is where a whole bunch of game groups or individuals go to their game store or go to a convention, and they all play through the same scenario on the same weekend. And at the end of it, it is possible that the publisher will aggregate the what happened, did you pass this point, did you do this with this person, will aggregate all of that. And if more than 50% of people did this particular thing, then they'll make this subtle change to their universe. That is not what Suzerain Legends Awaken is. And he was on who came to me and said, you've got a shared universe. Stop calling it a living campaign, because what you've got is a much more interactive experience between individual game groups in real time and with the publisher. Because one of the things I'll say is that I don't really consider myself to be the publisher on high who sits above the community. I'm a gamer first and foremost, and my love of sharing the game with people is what I'm really interested in, and I'm a publisher second to that. So I'm one of the community, and with Suzerain Legends Awaken, the idea is much more that tell us how you're doing. Let us help you. I have previously commissioned a series of portraits for a group of young heroes who are just going out, to inspire them and to let them really feel that bit of the Suzerain universe that they're going into. Because I didn't have any stock art built up that would fit that particular thing they wanted to do. So I actually commissioned portraits to be done for them, and that really just set them on the right path to really feeling their characters and having a great time in their campaign. So those kind of things, that's not your typical living campaign structure. As long as you're telling us about your game, and as long as you're pretty respectful, asking questions about, okay, what actually fits within the Suzerain universe and what's going too far, what's actually breaking the Suzerain universe, then that's it. I want to hear about as many games as I can. I want to be able to help as many game groups as I can, and I want to take as much of that information as I can and incorporate it into the next generation of what happens in the storyline. And I'm pretty proud of what we're doing. And I agree. It's not a living campaign. It's a shared universe.
Um, for me personally, and I don't mean to sound like I'm slagging the guy who gave you for that, but I think that's seeing the forest for the trees. Like,
Well, his point was that if you say that it's a living campaign, then people will imagine that they are going to Gen Con and they're going to sit down with 50 game groups at different tables and they're all going to play the same scenario. And that's what they're going to perceive. And that's not the experience that we're giving at all. So we shouldn't call it that, because we're misselling it to them. People who are looking forward to that experience will be upset to find out that that's not what we've got. And people who shudder at the idea of doing that will be turned off by Suzerain without actually giving us a chance to explain what it is that we're really doing. So I understand what he was saying and why, and I take it on board.
Yeah, it's one of those it's one of those things that is definitely up for some degree of debate. Um, but is but with all that said, if you and this is always the tricky one to ask. If you give a kind of defining statement about what Suzerain brings to the table that's unique to itself, what would that statement be?
Suzerain gives you a wonderfully flexible framework to play the game you want, and to have that game change over time in the way that you and your game group want, in a way that very few settings can do. It is not overly complicated. It's using Savage Worlds rule set, so it's nice. It's got that fast, furious, fun aspect to it, and yet it's nuanced. You can still find lots of little details in making your character unique and finding your fit for what type of hero you are. And I think that really nails it. That to me is Suzerain. You've got your superhero gaming, but your superhero could be from a fantasy world. He doesn't have to be a caped crusader. Your hero could be from a post-apocalyptic world, Mad Max style. It's the power level, it's the ability, and it's the mindset that says there's always hope. We're a hopeful, heroic setting that says no matter how nasty the environment around you is, no matter how bad that bit of the post-apocalyptic world is, no matter which dark corner of the maelstrom you go to, the prison realm, the realm of red, or wherever else, the truth is there's always hope that you can achieve great things and make a change to the universe. And that's Suzerain.
Mm-hmm. Well, with that said, I do want to sincerely thank you for taking the time to come into the temple. I hope it's definitely been a lot of fun on my end, and I hope it's been a lot of fun on your end as well. And as always, the open bar of the internet has its doors open to you anytime you see fit to return.
Well, thank you for that. I just want to say that I have had a great time. Really, really enjoyed my time here. The temple is a very welcoming place, and I look forward over time to talk to people who listen to the interview and maybe have comments and questions. Any of those? Hey, this is not like you say. The bar is open. Anybody can walk in at any time now, 6 months from now, and they can have their say. Always happy to shoot the breeze backwards and forwards.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody wants to know more, then savagemojo.com. Just come to the front page there, zip on down to the bottom, and we've got some links to where you can meet us on Facebook, in Discord, and the such like. Just drop into the community. We have no expectations of anybody who comes and becomes a community member must do this, or this. No, you come in, you hang out, you spend what time you want to. If you're interested in joining a game, if you're interested in hosting a game, whether it's online or around the table, mostly online now, please, folks, then very, very happy to have you. If you want to come to me with your samurai game and shoot the breeze about some of the options and ask for my help on putting together some neat, unique features for encounters, for boss fights, for characters, for equipment, for whatever else, I am all about it. I am delighted to help out. But yeah, savagemojo.com, just scroll to the bottom of the page and there are links to how to hook up with us.
And with that said, I do want to sincerely thank everybody who tuned in for the glorious insanity that comes every day here in the open bar of the internet. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.